Hey, what's up, loyal listening audience? We really appreciate you tracking with us on this journey. This is part 2 of Black Mental Wellness, and I interview a colleague of mine here in Northern Nevada. His name is Diaz Dixon, and Diaz has been an executive in the mental health community for many, many years now. He's got a really cool perspective, not only as an administrator, but as a clinician with a background in helping people, and as a black man from Nevada. So we dive into all those topics, and I think you're going to enjoy it. I continue to learn more and more as I go through this process. I'm honored to be a part of it. I'm humbled by what I don't know and excited by what I have yet to learn. Another great thanks to our founder at Noggin Notes, Safisa Rapinga, for pushing this idea of doing a series on Black mental wellness. We have a lot to learn, and I certainly, as a white man in Middle America here, I've got some more growing to do, because as much as I like to think I know about the vast diversity of human experience, I really know not very much. But what I do know is that if you want to learn more, you can sign up for a free 30-day trial through Audible. Audible is one of our sponsors. Go to audibletrial.com/nogginnotes, get your free 30-day trial, download as much content as you would like, but start with one. And that one you get to keep even if you cancel your trial. Go to audibletrial.com/nogginnotes, free 30-day trial, free audio download, get access to their totally unmatched selection of audio content, and expand your horizons. Also, check out zephyrwellness.org and follow us on our social media platforms, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and sometimes Twitter. You can get more content from us. We continue to produce it in the form of things like podcasts and videos and self-help slides on Instagram. Thanks again for all that you do to help advance the conversation around mental wellness and human connectivity. Enjoy the interview with Diaz. Well, Diaz, thank you for joining us on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Why don't you tell the audience who you are and how you came to be on this show and what you do for a living here in Reno, Nevada.
Well, first, Jake, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to sit down and talk to people who are doing good things in the community and in the world, and just really trying to spread positivity and at the same time address a number of solutions that are needed for the day-to-day problems that we deal with. And yeah, I'm Diaz Dixon, pretty much a simple black man who born and raised in Vegas, native Nevadan. I came up to Reno back in the late 80s to get my undergrad in social psychology.
You defected from Vegas and came to Reno.
I left and headed to the blue.
And we welcome you. We for those of you not familiar with the dynamics of Nevada, Northern Nevada does not like Southern Nevada, and I don't know that Southern Nevada even cares about Northern Nevada.
No, Southern Nevada tends to think Northern Nevada doesn't even exist. So, that is kind of the mindset that they have down there. But we know that the North is strong.
Yes.
So yeah, and when I left here, I left for a couple of years and went to grad school to get my master's in counseling at University of Iowa, and quickly learned that Reno is not cold and that Reno does not have bugs. So I hightailed it back here, and I did some private practice work with people with traumatic brain injuries and strokes for a number of years, and then I did private rehab, doing some workers' comp type of work. I worked for the state for a while. Most notably, I ran a program for a little over 14 years, a substance abuse treatment facility for women and children called Step 2, which was a program that still has my heart. Throughout the process, throughout that time, I was able to do a couple of different things that were fun. I worked for President Bush's New Freedom Initiative, which was the Cultural Competency and Diversity Network. So for 4 years, I served on that committee on the national level. And I also worked for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, helping give out money for states that were looking to help people with their mental health services. And today, I proudly sit as the CEO of the Eddy House, which is a homeless youth center, and we have 43 beds here in this particular facility with 4 other sites that we're just really working on the issue that is youth homelessness, helping them get off the streets, find suitable and gainful employment, address any of their mental health needs and struggles they might have, maybe substance use, whatever, everything that's wrapped up into what brought them to be homeless or has them on the brink of homelessness. We're putting forward and fighting through. And now I humbly sit here on this podcast with a great opportunity to talk to you today.
Oh yeah, it's a internationally renowned podcast too. There is no limits to the reach of Noggin Notes. But I wanted to, excuse me, I want to spend some time talking about the Eddy House, but also youth homelessness and how it differs from adult homelessness. We had Pat Cashell on and Austin Pollard from the VOA. Several months ago, and they talked about a little bit about what's going on in the adult world of homelessness, but that was all pre-COVID stuff and before a large explosion of the homeless problem, at least in Reno, but also I know generically across the country. So help us understand what the dynamics are, what people are facing, resource deficiencies, what you guys are taxed with, and then obviously we brought you on because this is, about Black mental wellness, and talk a little bit maybe how it disproportionately affects people of color or doesn't, because I'm not familiar with the demographics.
Well, it absolutely does, Jake. And our population is different because with youth homelessness, the feds define us in the age category of 18 to 24. So oftentimes kids are coming to us from many different angles. They may be coming out of the foster care system. So imagine a kid turning 18 and losing their benefits or losing their system of support. Now you're 18, you're on your own, you need to just go ahead and take off. For all of us, most of us who have kids, and particularly kids of that age, know that our kids would probably struggle if they didn't continue to have our ongoing support. It's very in the fact that older people who are homeless have been homeless for a while. And they tend to be probably a little bit more savvy, set in their ways, probably really deep in their own mental illnesses, whereas these young people are still trying to find themselves as young adults, figure out who they are and how they fit into this world. Research shows that 85% of them, if given the appropriate tools and assistance in this age group, be homeless as adults if you can just give them the help. And there's different categories. We've got chronic homelessness, which typically is the most well-known. And you see that more so with the older adults. That's different than this population. You have episodic homelessness, which can turn into chronic homelessness, but often cases there's been a really bad episode in their life that has shifted or thwarted them towards homelessness. Transitional homelessness, where people are just, it's pretty common where they're just bouncing around. Maybe someone's living from couch to couch. They don't have a really solid place where they're living, moving into weekly motels, things like that. Our kids are oftentimes the hidden homeless because many of them are working and they look, from appearance like they've got everything all together, but they are basically surviving on the streets. What's different for the people of color, and particularly African Americans, is there's even less resources that are available to them because, as you can imagine, you are living in a dominant culture, trying to figure out who you are when you have a healthy environment, and healthy parents that are raising you. Oftentimes, the young Black kids that we're seeing feel very ostracized and come with a couple of extra walls of defensiveness, really believing that the world is against them and that oftentimes maybe some incidents that weren't necessarily racially fueled, they feel like they are. And our typical approaches to dealing with homelessness and a lot of our mental health approaches are Eurocentric. So we're really focusing here at Eddy House on trying to be as individualized with the care, but taking all the cultural considerations into the treatment planning with each of them as individuals. it's a daunting task. When I first started, we had more of the Black kids were failing out than any of the other ones. They'd come in and really just fall out of our program really quickly until we started addressing it as a staff and conscientiously looking at how we could do things differently.
You cut out a little bit when I think you said Eurocentric with regard to the interventions. What do you mean by that? And is that the word you used, was Eurocentric?
Yeah, that is the word I used in Eurocentric. And I'm sorry, I'll speak up a little bit. I know my speaker's a little weak this morning. So our typical approaches, and particularly in mental health counseling, even, when you're looking across the board, they've been founded on our European ancestors.
Sure, Swiss psychiatrists, right?
Yeah. And so not a lot of the cultural implications in dealing with people of color have come into effect when we're looking at the school of thoughts, the different foundations of counseling services. Cultural considerations have only been really into play over the last probably 40 years. And even so, they haven't been integrated with all the different teachings. So whether you're talking about Gestalt or even some of the cognitive behavioral practices that we use, the cultural component is often missed, particularly in the stages of when we're building rapport. And that's where we see a lot of struggle. And even when I was doing some individual counseling, and even when the years I was working at Step 2, I found early I recognized the shortcomings with the Native American population. And then it wasn't until probably the last 20 years that I recognized that there are a number of shortcomings in dealing with the African American populations. And then on top of that, you have a lot of distrust from the African American culture to counseling in general, to medical, to health, and a lot of that has been passed on. So it's African American males are one of the last groups to ever go see a doctor when in need, and so that it just creates an imperfect storm, if we may.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I would like to get a little more granular with this because one of my previous interviews was with Dr. Danielle Busby from Black Mental Wellness, and she was talking about, my brain is not working this morning; it's too early. She was alluding to some of the same topics and frustrations that you did there, as far as the suspicion of the system and distrust in medical in general, and then there's a cultural component of self-reliance, and I get those. Mm-hmm. What I'd like to hear more about, because I'm a listening practitioner, I guess I don't know what the cultural components are, because we all went through the course of, we read the Sue and Sue book, Daryl Wing Sue, for those of you who don't know, he's kind of the forerunner of cultural competence in counseling. But for me, it was watching my classmates try to digest that information seemed like it was compartmentalized. It was like, hey, if you're dealing with X demographic, be aware of X, Y, and Z. If you're dealing with Z demographic, be aware of A, B, and C. And it's like, okay, I can kind of intellectualize that, but then you turn human beings into these almost dehumanized objects that simply have characteristics to be mindful of, as opposed to depth of understanding integrated into the approach. And I don't know what I don't know. So when I think of, cultural competency, what I want to do is I want to be humble and curious and just ask the person where they are and let them educate me. But I'm getting the sense that that's not sufficient. And I'm wondering what you're referencing here. If you could give maybe some concrete examples.
Well, I think you're right on par, Jake, with your approach and asking them and allowing them to identify themselves. What we all have to do better as practitioners is continue to dig a little bit deeper. So where does that take the relationship once they throw out the general piece of their identity? A person of color, an African American, will throw out, okay, yeah, well, I'm an African American male and I'm from the southern part of Nevada. They may stop right there. The defensiveness doesn't come down there. So it's really going a couple of extra steps, and also understanding, you touched on something when we were saying we're dehumanizing. we got to remember that